Now it's time for a Q&A with Cindy Hoisington, MED, from the EDC. She will answer questions about her presentation, Science and Talk, a natural fit for young dual language learners. Dr. Jessica Amsbury is the moderator.
I have another question here from Sherry, and she asks, do you have any suggestions on documenting while you're co-exploring? Sometimes it's hard to stay fully engaged when you're trying to document what's happening in classrooms.
It is hard, Sherry. It is, and that's something I hear a lot from teachers. I want to be interacting with the child. I don't want to be observing. So suggestions for me include a lot of visual documentation, so taking photos as much as possible. In terms of note-taking, I think we all develop our own shorthand, because absolutely you cannot be taking long-handed notes of every single word spelled out that the children are saying. But, video, transcribing conversations, using audio, recording just the audio parts of conversations is always good. And then saving any documentation that the child is creating or the children are creating as well. But for conversations, I found recording, and I think you wouldn't have noticed, it would have flashed by so fast, but one teacher who actually put recorders on every small group table. Well, she couldn't be everywhere at once, but later she could pick up the recorders and have documentation of all of the conversations at all the different tables.
That's great. I always like that as a parent too, to see the quotes, the way the children are describing their creation.
Oh, there's nothing, especially working with parents of dual language learners, that I ever found that speaks so loudly, not just about what their kids are learning in science, but around how much their teacher cares about them. That the teacher creates this visual documentation of what their child did during the day. And so if there's challenges with communicating too with parents sometimes, the old expression, a picture says, is 1,000 words. It really speaks very loudly to parents about the kind of care and the kind of attention and that their children are getting at school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. My next question is from Shelby, and she would like to know whether you think it's better to use small group discussions rather than whole group in early childhood science.
Oh, hands down. This stuff isn't rocket science, right? So I always think about what would we like better. And you think as adults, if you're going to have a conversation about a topic that you are really interested in, would you rather be sitting with 4 or 5 other people, or would you rather be sitting with 20 other people? Of course, nobody right now in these days is sitting with 20 other people. But I have been in preschool conversations where the teacher literally went child to child around the circle, and I was sitting in the circle, and I was sweating. And this was a classroom in which kids had, crisscross applesauce and weren't supposed to move around. I was sweating just from the, wanting to be able to talk or wanting to be able to kind of move things along. It's large groups, but that being said, when managed well, large group conversations can be a really nice touch point for different small groups to kind of share with the large group what they're doing, or if we're kind of pulling it all together. This group thought that the purple ball went faster. This group thought the blue ball went faster. Let's talk about those 2 balls and how they're the same and different. So managed skillfully, I think large group conversations periodically can be wonderful. And let's face it, in some schedules, in some school systems, there's no choice. It's large group circle time, and that's the way it's done, or you simply don't have enough adults in the room to manage it any other way. So I have, especially in early elementary, I have seen large group conversations managed well, particularly when kids can go off into a small group and then come back. I mean, and those are kids that can work in small groups a little more independently once you get into kindergarten and first grade, but then come back and share. So I don't want to sound down about large group conversations, because I think they're important. And like I said, sometimes, that's the majority of the type of conversations that a teacher can have in a classroom. You just want to be aware of time, be aware of who's doing all the talking. Think about having norms for conversation. Norms that say things like, if you have a lot of ideas, share one idea and then let someone else share an idea. Or invite quiet people into the conversation. You just briefly go over those, just very briefly at the beginning of a large group conversation, and say, remember, and remind them that there will be other times to talk too.
That actually sort of leads us into our next question from Stephanie, and she's asking or observing that sometimes dual language learners spend a long time as the quiet observer, as the quiet student. How important is it to let them step back and observe versus trying to scaffold and promote their participation?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that recognizing that that's that dual language learners often need that space, just because they're not understanding all the words that are being said. They need to watch people and watch what's happening over a period of time to know that every day this is going to be a predictable schedule. Every day, this is how things happen in this classroom. What you don't want to do, and what I'm kind of pushing back against, is what I too often see, where dual language learners are left for too long and they're not brought in because the feeling is, well, they need to learn more English before they can join in. And I'll just give you a very poignant example that I saw in a first grade. Kids had been pair sharing about worms that they had looked at the day before. And of course, very excited and describing the worms and what they had been doing and this and that. And then the teacher had was talking about the habitat of a worm. And she had some questions up on the board that she had gone over. And kids were supposed to finish, they were like sentence starters, So the worm looked like, and then you fill in. And one little boy was sitting in the back. Now, all he had picked up was that there was something on the board he should be writing down, and he was copying the directions of what to do in case of a fire that were posted nearby. And, the teacher was circulating, and I couldn't help it. I was observing, not supposed to get involved, but I just kind of, pointed to have her look at his paper. And she said, oh, he's a bright boy. He'll do great once he learns English. And, that's the kind of leaving alone that I worry about. It's like any other kind of individualized planning, right? A kid needs something. It's like the kid at the water table that, has to keep pouring water back and forth into different cups. But then you notice a week later, they're still doing the same thing. They're using the materials in the exact same way. You think to yourself, maybe it's time to go up and give them a nudge and try to get them moving to the next level. And you'll get a feeling if they're ready or not. And more often than not, dual language learners want to be brought into the conversation. So even just sitting them close to you, or making sure that physically, they're participating or engaged, can go a long way in kind of making them feel more comfortable.
Yeah. I will go ahead and move on to Peggy's next question. And she's wondering if your study is able to support discourse between the educators who are participating in the study virtually. Is it ongoing virtually right now?
Because the work that was documented in the presentation, no, is not the same work that's going on right now. And the follow-up project that I talked about that's following up on the work that was documented in the presentation is just started. We just got the funding like 3 weeks ago. So it hasn't, we're not in classrooms yet. We haven't met with teachers or families yet, not even remotely. So in terms of supporting discussion with teachers virtually. We have been supporting in my first grade project that I'm working on. We've been supporting conversations with teachers virtually, and to be honest, we're learning a lot from them. So they're helping us think about some of these science experiences for kids, and trying out new ways of how they might be delivered to kids virtually, and then we're having discussions with them about that, which is, I know, not quite what was meant by the question, but that's what we're doing. I'm not doing any actual teaching of teachers or those kinds of discussions with teachers.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. And then there's a theme amongst the next couple of questions, and people are asking, this might have to be our last question I'm seeing, we have 2 minutes, so asking about adapting science learning for children with disabilities such as low vision,
Mom, look at me.
or things beyond dual language learners.
Yeah, so in our first, it's actually a first and fourth grade project, but in our first grade units, we have a unit on sound and we have a unit on light. We've had a lot of discussions about adaptations for other kinds of challenges that children bring to the classroom. What we did, and we don't think that it's enough, but for example, for the unit on light, we adapted it for children with vision challenges, and for the unit on sound, we adapted it for children with hearing challenges. In other words, so challenges that were explicitly, directly connected to the topic of the unit. And that's where we focused. And, you know, one of my colleagues says, as much as we think we write good curriculum, he said, when teachers of special needs children look at this, they're like, it's not enough. So we're trying to figure out what is enough, and that's what we've worked on so far.
Yeah, and then we're working on similar stuff here at STEMI, so that's a great.
Exactly. I mean, which is why I'm so honored and appreciative to be hooked up with you.
Well, us too.
STEMI.
I think we need to wrap up. There are some remaining questions, so we might be able to answer on the side or something, but I think we need to start our next thing. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful conference.